Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. I think that the DOJ, as we know this week, filed its proposed final. I forget what the formal title of the document was. It was like proposed final judicial findings or something like the judgment, and it's essentially a blueprint for the court, if the court accepts it, to punish Google for its monopolistic behavior. And they were asking for Google to sell Chrome, which Bloomberg, I think, in an article I saw, estimated to be potentially worth $20 billion. That may be inflated, but it's a lot of money. Sell Chrome, get rid of all the default Google app installs on smartphones.
On Android.
On Android, yes. And if that doesn't work, that's the only place where they have that kind of power. If that doesn't work, then sell off Android, and then license the index and search data to rivals. And then there's a bunch of stuff around generative AI, transparency stuff, and restrictions, involving some delivery of information to third parties. So it's
the end of payment to Apple.
Yes, that's the most important part here that I neglected to mention. The end of the default search deal with Apple. And we don't know what's going to happen when Trump comes in. He's got, I forget. So Bondi, I guess, is the attorney general now, nominee. So she's going to be approved. We don't have any idea what's going to happen with this. Trump has said he's not going to break up Google, but in terms of the default search deal, that's the thing that's most likely to get through. All these broader sort of quasi-structural or structural remedies are probably less likely to happen ultimately, but the end of that deal is the thing of what has been proposed that's most likely to terminate. And so this stuff that you're talking about, Apple is really preparing for a time when he can't rely on that money, and also responding. It's got Google on one side and it's got ChatGPT and AI search on another side, and so it's really modifying Siri to deliver some of what Google maybe has been doing in the past, and also to respond to what the user experience that OpenAI and others like it are delivering, which makes Siri look really pathetic by comparison. Now, in 18.1 it's getting better, stronger. 18.2 it's going to get better, but it had to do that. And
well, again, Apple is bringing ChatGPT in, and they make this distinction between personal information and worldwide information. They made that in their talk. And Apple is doing an incredible job of delivering sports, movies, TVs, weather, directions as personal information. Now, a lot of that doesn't seem that personal to me, but really the definition is if they have it in a knowledge graph, they're going to have trust in the information. They're going to be able to tailor the delivery. They also have Wikipedia in a knowledge graph, and you get Wikipedia screens.
And we know that 70 to 90% of search queries are informational. People looking for general information, and this is going to impact that area of search volume.
And we also know that the search experience, the experience of getting answers in these little snippets, is a much more fulfilling, satisfying, enjoyable way, efficient, with none of the stuff you've been complaining about Google, of bad information and noise and so on. So it answers a lot of your questions without being a search engine. It's an informational answer engine.
Or one's questions.
What's that?
My questions, me as an individual.
Well, you have a lot of...
I have a lot of issues with Google.
You have a lot of issues with Google, as many people do, and your issues are probably global, reflective of a global.
Well, interesting. There's an interesting. I don't know if we have enough time to go into this, but so I just wanted to mention before we run out of time today, and this is relevant to the conversation. So Rand Fishkin put up a chart. He did an analysis with SimilarWeb and Datos data that was trying to determine what's the share of search that ChatGPT actually has. And he did this broader analysis. It's not just search engines, it's this cross-platform share of search from the data coming from October 2024, this last month. And he looked at Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, Pinterest, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Bing, YouTube, and of course Google. And Google is the dominant one at basically 83%. YouTube is second with about 7%, but ChatGPT has a little over 4% more than Bing. And this speaks to, what some people are talking about, the fragmentation of search, which, Google will retain its dominant position, but it's a question of to what degree. So Siri is going to peel away a lot of queries based on the user experience that you're describing. ChatGPT is already doing that to some degree, principally in the informational arena, which, is the bulk of queries. And then there's a certain amount of data that shows, Gen Z, younger people are using TikTok and Instagram to answer what would otherwise be search queries. And then we've got YouTube, which is of course owned by Google. So we're starting to see some fragmentation of this. And just as a kind of a final note here.
Well, I have one other thing to add
Yes.
to that. Let me just
Yes.
look up my numbers so they're accurate. I was looking at current Apple traffic that's being provided through Maps to a restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico, high-end Japanese restaurant. And during the month of October, there were 340. I didn't compare this to Google. In a sense, it's irrelevant what Google is doing, right? There was almost 1,000 searches for this restaurant on Apple Maps. 14% of those were category searches,
Right.
not brand searches.
Right. So Japanese restaurant, sushi, whatever.
184 website visits, 80 phone calls, 28 shares with other people, and 35 table reservations. Now,
Through Apple Maps.
Through Apple Maps, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in the right vertical now, Apple, in an unmeasured way that Rand didn't even look at, is sending meaningful traffic to this restaurant.
Well, Apple was not even a part of Apple Maps, and Apple was not even a part of his analysis.
Right, because you can't track it as easily. But this restaurant's getting one reservation a day. And this place, you don't leave there with less than a $200 bill. I've been there. It's a very nice place, but it's a $200 bill. So, that's got to be, you know what I mean? It's like the fragmentation is happening now. It's not necessarily in the future, but it's going to continue, and it's not even going to be called searching.
I totally agree. So just one quick final note before we go. So I did a consumer survey, 1,000 consumers. It was AI versus search. What do you like better for this kind of context? What do you think is going to happen in the future? What are you doing now? And two data points. This has not been released. Two data points. I had assumed. I asked a bunch of people online. Is search better or worse today than it used to be? And the majority of people, and this was only about 150 respondents, the majority of people said it's quite a bit worse, harder to find what you're looking for. In this consumer survey, people did not say that. I was flabbergasted. People said it was easier. There were a variety of responses. Is it easier? Is it harder? It was sort of gradations. People on balance said it was easier to find stuff on Google today than in the past, which just shocked me. But they also said that within 3 years, they thought AI search was going to replace traditional web search.
And my bet is 3 years, we're going to be doing it on our phone as a feature of the phone, not as a search engine.
Oh, and I think people would prefer that. I think people would prefer that integrated experience, provided the information is trustworthy and complete. Absolutely. Right. And there's another conversation to be had about how that Siri experience and increasing search volume for local may impact what Apple is doing. It's trying to expand the data it's collecting with Apple Business Connect, but I think there's some interesting things to think about in terms of where local goes for Apple in the future.
I
agree.
All
right. On that note.
Well, on that note, just want to remind people that we're moving our newsletter behind a paywall. We would love your support and help. We would love you to help us stay around reporting our amazing tidbits of information. And so please join the newsletter if you get a chance. Share us with a friend if you get a chance. Upvote us on Apple Podcast. We'll take support however you give it.
And also, we're going to be doing monthly office hours where people get to do Q&A, and we talk about very tactical things. And we're thinking about other value adds as well, which we are still working through. So please support us, keep us going, and we appreciate your loyalty and your listening as always. And for those in the US, have a great Thanksgiving. We will be off next week and back the following week.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.